Another Fox News alert for you on a move that could signal a big shift in the special counsel's investigation into Russian election interference. Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's lawyers have cut ties with the White House legal team. This is Outnumbered. I'm Dagen McDowell, and here today, anchor of the Intelligence Report on Fox Business, Trish Regan, National Review reporter Katherine Timpf, Democratic strategist Jessica Tarlov, and today's hashtag, One Lucky Guy. We welcome back the chairman of GOPAC, David Avella, and he is outnumbered. Although you were in West Virginia for Thanksgiving, so not so outnumbered. I'll be on your side.
I feel more like perhaps one served too many pieces of pie guy today.
Well, you are. It doesn't show, and you're wearing a dark color, which, as a woman, I can instruct you.
I was happy to have gotten black today, to say the least.
It's very slimming. On the other hand, me, not so much. David, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
But let's get this started. Lawyers for Michael Flynn telling the president's legal team that they are no longer communicating with them about Mueller's investigation. This fueling speculation that the former national security advisor may be trying to cut a deal. Plus, new developments in the investigation of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Manafort facing money laundering and conspiracy charges. Now new reporting that Manafort traveled to Russia 18 times in the years leading up to the Trump campaign and was in constant communication with President Putin's allies for almost a decade. Phil Keating joins us live from West Palm Beach, Florida, near where President is spending the holiday weekend. Phil, what can you tell us?
Hi, Dagen. Well, the president has woken up now for the third straight morning at his Mar-a-Lago winter White House over on Palm Beach. And he did tweet several things this morning. He tweeted about the terror attack in Egypt. He tweeted that he was going to have a phone call to discuss regional matters with Turkey's president. And he also sent out yet another angry tweet against the NFL for the ongoing national anthem controversy. But none of his tweets mentioned or reacted to anything at all regarding his former national security advisor. Not one. He didn't give any reaction, nor did he comment on this apparent new development in the special prosecutor's investigation. First reported by the New York Times, General Michael Flynn's attorneys are said to be no longer sharing information with Trump's legal team about special prosecutor Robert Mueller's probe into possible Russia collusion with members of the Trump campaign. Experts say this could mean a plea deal's in the works. It could mean Flynn and his attorneys are cooperating with Mueller, or it could mean nothing. Trump attorney Jay Sekulow gave us this short reaction just about an hour ago. Quote, "This is not entirely unexpected. No one should draw the conclusion that this means anything about General Flynn cooperating against the president. It's important to remember that General Flynn received his security clearance under the previous administration." And a former business associate of General Flynn has reportedly become a subject of the special counsel's probe for his role in the failure of Flynn's former lobbying firm to disclose its work on behalf of foreign governments. The report suggests federal investigators are honing in on Bijan Kayan, an Iranian American who was a partner at the former Flynn Intel Group, questioning several witnesses in recent weeks about Kayan's lobbying work on behalf of Turkey. And Paul Manafort, the one-time Trump campaign chairman, who has already been indicted by the special prosecutor. According to a new report by the McClatchy news agency, Manafort made 18 previously undisclosed trips to Moscow while he was working on behalf of Ukraine, even though at the time and since he has long maintained he had no ties to Russia. As for President Trump himself, for the third straight day, he is visiting one of his golf clubs. Today, it's about 30 miles north of West Palm Beach in Jupiter, the Trump National Golf Club, and he's taking in what he called a quick round of golf with a couple of pretty good players. You may have heard of them. Tiger Woods and Dustin Johnson, who is the current #1 world-ranked golfer. Not too bad. Should be fun on the links. A memorable day for everybody, and, you know, sometimes it's good to be president, Dagen.
It is, Phil Keating, and I will add, it's my understanding President Trump might not have a better handicap than Tiger Woods or Dustin Johnson, but I think he does have the best golf handicap of any living president, so I'll give him that today. Phil Keating, thank you so much.
I'm hoping they let him win.
Not likely. Phil, thank you for that. Well, let's bring it back to the couch on the news of what is going on with Michael Flynn and the Mueller Russia probe. David, to you first on this, your reaction.
Another leak that doesn't give one piece of credible evidence to Americans that this investigation, which started out as collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, somehow cost Hillary Clinton the election. And we continue to get these leaked reports that are giving us no evidence, but yet is completely about PR. Because if we're going to talk about how many trips Paul Manafort made to Russia before he even started the campaign, let's talk about how many times Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, made deals with the Russians and how many times she talked to them. Let's talk about how many times Bill Clinton went over and talked to the Russians. This is all a PR stunt that continues to try to make Americans think something happened when not one piece of credible evidence has been presented.
Bill Clinton went and collected money for it.
Say again?
Bill Clinton went and collected money for it to the tune of $500 grand. Anyway, just saying.
But it's not just a PR stunt. You'll give it that. This is a special counsel investigation, and the danger is that these investigations put pressure on people to maybe say things to get their loved ones off the hook. And I'll point to Michael Flynn's son, because based on reports, Michael Flynn, his son, also named Michael, has expressed concern in recent weeks to people that prosecutors will bring charges against his son. So again, therein lies the kind of shadiness of some of these investigations, is you put pressure on people to maybe tell the special counsel things that did or didn't happen.
Alan Dershowitz told me exactly this. His concern in all of it
saw that.
Is that that's exactly what's going to happen. That people are forced into maybe even saying things that aren't entirely true, because the prosecutors have an agenda. They're going for the jugular. And the danger is that you're putting people in a position where they'll at some point make up anything just to get out from under.
Michael Flynn has made things up before. He's not really a trustworthy guy. We know for a fact that he lied. When he said those meetings with the Russians were holiday greetings, turns out they were talking about sanctions. Those are very, very different things. Obviously, if you got like a sanctions card in December, had some sanctions carolers at your door instead of holiday ones, you might be a little confused. There's no mix-up there. He lied.
And we also know that he was working as a foreign agent.
Wait, let me add to that. Let me add to that before we move on, Jessica, that he lied to the vice president.
Yes.
He lied to Vice President Pence and was alerted by those people in the Justice Department. Sally Yates said Flynn's lying. He might be a target for extortion from the Russians. That was the reason he got fired by the White House after serving just I think 24 days.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate what you're saying, that this is just a PR stunt, but I wholeheartedly disagree here. When we've seen 2 indictments come down already, and the George Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, then we have the George Papadopoulos issue where he admitted that he lied to the FBI about connections with the Russians. Mike Flynn was, for a lot of people, the #1 target in all of this, his son as well. We know that he has worked as a foreign agent. We know that his son has been involved. We know that he lied, as Kat Timpf, I don't know why I just said your last name. Everyone knows your last name. I was like, Kat Timpf. As Kat pointed out, I don't understand how you could say that this is a PR stunt. We don't know if he's cooperating or not, but to say that he's just doing it to protect his son. We don't know if it has anything to do with Donald
Trump himself, of course.
What evidence do we have that any of this is going to lead to collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians? And to date, no evidence has been presented.
I think the problem, though, is this guy's credibility. In other words, does he have the right kind of credibility for anybody to take him seriously at this point?
Final word, and I will point out the Manafort indictment didn't involve anything during the 2016 election. The only thing that Manafort's charged with doing last year is lying to federal investigators. Meantime, Donald Trump Jr., who himself is under scrutiny over his meeting with a Russian lawyer and communications with WikiLeaks, defiantly firing back at his critics. After posting what he calls the entire chain of private messages that he exchanged with WikiLeaks during last year's campaign, the president's son saying, quote, "More nothing burgers from the media and others desperately trying to create a false narrative. Keep coming at me, guys." I think that Donald Jr., Trish, is taking a page from his father's playbook. And it's certainly raising his speaking fees, it seems like. But he said, "I'm not going to act guilty." And that's what's going on.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what he should do. In other words, we're going to talk about Roy Moore, I know, later in the show, but one of the problems with Roy Moore is that he never got out in front of these accusations. You got to get out in front of this stuff. Otherwise, you do look guilty. And so I give him credit. He is poking the bear to a certain extent, but simultaneously, don't do that unless you're innocent. And he clearly is demonstrating that he's innocent.
Or that he wants you to think he's innocent. I mean, he's absolutely taking a page out of his father's playbook here. We know that he's under investigation. There are people who are talking that Don Jr. and Jared Kushner could end up indicted out of all of this. Maybe it's just for what dirty deals that have gone on in the city before they even got to Washington. Might not be Russians, but Mueller's looking at the full breadth of what they've done over the last, I don't know how many years.
Yeah, not focusing on actual...
I wonder, what if his dad is writing his tweets? I mean, that's how much the same that they are. Absolutely. Like, I love the Beatles because my dad liked the Beatles, so I get how that can happen. But I think that we're really undervaluing just shutting up in this situation. I mean, in society in general, we all need to shut up a little more, but especially if you're under investigation. I think most lawyers would tell you, shh, tweet about something else.
Yeah, but they're coming at him hard, and back to the whole PR stunt. There is an element of public relations in all of this too, and I think when you have these drips and drabs coming out leak-wise that paint you as guilty, you need to be able to
maybe
have
some
some
with WikiLeaks.
Well, Don Jr. didn't give up his First Amendment right just because he's the son of the president.
No one's saying that. Come on, I'm not saying that he doesn't have the right to. I'm saying that maybe it'd be better for him not to. It may not be sound
legal strategy, and that's for lawyers to talk about. But from a perspective of he should be able to say what he wants. Look, I'm old enough to remember that the children of President Reagan used to get criticized because they were against what the president was for, and the media loved talking about that. Now, this son, President Trump's son, is out there advocating for his father and the policies he's out there for, and the media's criticizing him for being the advocate for Trumpism. The best thing he could do, the best thing this White House could do, is send Don Trump Jr. to West Virginia, to Indiana, to Montana,
I'm
and
not
put
disputing
pressure
that the base
on those Democrats who should be voting for tax cuts, actually are getting the pressure put on them to vote for tax cuts.
And let me add one thing. He is appealing to the president's base, and he is a very vocal advocate for his father. But it comes down to, it's a family thing. If you see your dad being attacked over and over and over again, and people saying things that very often aren't true, wouldn't you be just angry about it and want to get out there and defend your dad and defend your family and defend your name? And I think that it is personal. It's come down.
It's something that you can understand emotionally why you want to do that. But sometimes where your emotions lead you are not the best things to do legally.
I just think that it's pretty simple. They're coming after his dad. They're coming after his family. And he wants to have his say. And he wants to say, no, this is all bogus. And bring it on. Fine. You can keep trying, but you're not going to get anywhere. And I don't have a problem with him saying that.
I mean, when we get the final results, as it were, from Bob Mueller, we will know once and for all about this. But Don Jr. direct messaged on Twitter with WikiLeaks. The meeting with the lawyer at Trump Tower, where he didn't kick that to legal right away, which I think everyone on this couch would have done, not just pass it on to Jared and say, oh, we should do this.
As the child of a politician, you might have, but he's not the child of a politician.
Listen, he is the child of a billionaire businessman who has...
Adult child.
A very adult child. This is not someone in their early 20s. It's someone in their late 30s who has been around the block working with his father for a very long time. I believe he should have known better, but either way, this thing that he does when he gets caught, he then spews it all out on the internet and says, see, look, I'm being transparent. And as Kat's saying, the strategy of just tweeting and tweeting and tweeting is just for base rallying. And so if something does happen, he can say, like Roy Moore is doing, oh, it's fake news. There's a conspiracy against us. And Bob Mueller's not leading a conspiracy against the Trump family.
Well, I mean, that's actually based on opinion, given if you have a special counsel that's looking at things way outside of his purview, meaning meddling in the national election by Russia last year, which, again, these people are going to fall on charges
that
related to just lying, nothing
to
do with meddling in the election, but to do with lying. And to Donald Jr., his speaking fees are going through the roof. So
I'm not disputing that at all. The base loves it.
Yeah,
you're looking to appeal to the base, those tweets, absolutely.
Exactly. Urgent talks to keep the federal government up and running. New details on the president's meeting with congressional leaders next week. What Democrats want and who's going to get blamed if there is a shutdown. Plus the final countdown to a special election in Alabama that the whole country is watching. Embattled Republican candidate Roy Moore stepping up attacks against the Republican establishment and whether that strategy is working.
I definitely believe the establishment is trying to stop Roy Moore.
We're bringing you news of an incident in London to tell you about at the Oxford Circus subway station. British police say they're responding to reports of an incident described as a customer incident by some. British Transport Police were tweeting Friday afternoon that officers were on the scene. There are reports of shots fired. Witnesses on social media report people running into nearby shops and pubs, running for cover out of the Oxford Street tube station there in London. Again, we will bring you more details as we get them, but London clearly on high alert after the city has experienced 2 terror incidents this year, 2 terror attacks, the most recent one being June 3rd when people were killed on London Bridge when a van ran into them. So Oxford Circus, police responding to an incident at that subway station. We'll bring you more information as we get it.
President Trump gearing up for a big week ahead. He is scheduled to meet with congressional leadership on Tuesday to discuss what he wants accomplished by the end of the year. First on the list, tax reform. The Senate planning to vote on its tax bill next week, with several senators still undecided. Also on the docket, averting a government shutdown as Republicans and Democrats disagree on how to protect the Dreamers, with the president recently signaling that welfare reform could also be on the agenda. So we got a busy end of year, David.
We do have a busy end of the year. First and foremost is getting taxes cut. You know better than anybody. We cut taxes. We're going to see more jobs. We're going to see wages go up, particularly with this tax cut, the way it is crafted. It's going to help the middle class. That is beginning. 1, it's good policy. 2, it's the single most important things Republicans can do going into the 2018 election.
I like that you love it that much. I don't love it that much. I mean, I like the corporate side. I do like the corporate side. I don't like the individual side. I don't think it does a lot for the middle class, although, you know, the reality is, as you often say, half of Americans do not pay any federal income tax at all. And the reality is the wealthiest or the highest earning part of the population has the majority of the burden. What is it? The top 10% pays 71% of all taxes. So on the individual side, I think they could have done a whole lot more. And
but think about how dramatically different this conversation is. We are discussing how big a tax cut should be. If there was a Democrat in office, we wouldn't be talking about tax cuts. We'd be talking about tax
increases. That's true. That's very true. And by the way, if they don't get this through, we might in fact come 2018 be talking about exactly that.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but they might not be able to agree on this at all. Those undecideds, there's not going to be any Democrats who support this. You're going to need Republicans on Republicans on Republicans on Republicans to support this, and we're not seeing that right now. We haven't seen that in the past with Obamacare repeal. Obviously, that little thing didn't work out the way that they wanted it to. So I love tax cuts. I think that they're fantastic. I think they're great for the economy.
Well, you don't believe in taxation.
I don't believe in taxation at all, because I like to be able to spend my own money the way that God intended.
Rather than the government.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just don't feel optimistic.
But there's so much more on that needs to get taken care of by the end of the year, dealing with the Dreamers,
right,
which Nancy Pelosi says that's of utmost importance.
And for a clean bill.
Yeah,
right.
Worried about. That's her requirement.
No, I said that's her requirement.
Right.
That's of utmost importance to her, dealing with 700,000 people rather than 140 million people when it comes to tax cuts. And I'm not suggesting that Dreamers don't pay taxes, so don't tweet me nasty tweets about that. That's not what I'm saying.
Well,
but nevertheless, I can't wait for this meeting with Trump and Schumer and Pelosi and Ryan and McConnell.
To be a fly on that wall.
I kind of feel like Trump once again will throw McConnell and Ryan under the bus.
Chuck and Nancy are his longtime friends. You know, Mitch and Paul are new guys who aren't supporting him the way that he feels like they should be. So he's definitely going to go with the usual suspects here. And that's how we got that original tweet saying, oh, don't worry, kids who are here, you know, Dreamers, you're going to be safe. I mean, the Democrats do want a clean Dreamers bill. There are a lot of Republicans who want that as well. But to Kat's point, you're not going to get a Democrat for this bill for a lot of the reasons that Trish brought up here, but a lot more than that. And for a lot of the reasons that, you know, there are senators still on the fence here, including the Obamacare individual mandate repeal.
Problem is we have a lot of people calling themselves Republicans in the Senate, and they're not. They're Democrats.
You're not going to get a single Democrat until Republicans get to 51, and then all of a sudden Joe Manchin, Joe Donnelly, Tester, all the Democrats up in 18 are going to vote for it. It'll get 58 or 59 votes.
No. Let's go and take you back to London. I want to bring in Benjamin Hall, who is in London reporting on this incident at the Oxford Circus subway station there. Police there responding to reports of shots fired. Benjamin Hall, what can you tell us?
Yeah, well, that's going on at the moment, and there is a major police operation underway at the moment. We still don't know the exact details. What we do know is that at about 4:45 this evening in Oxford Circus, this is the busiest shopping road in London. It's Black Friday, people making their way home. There were reports of shots fired, and police in a statement have said they responded as if this was a terror-related incident. We do not at this moment know whether it was or not, but we do know that hundreds of people were evacuated out of the station and surrounding shops onto the street, and they were urged by the police to get inside any buildings. We have seen armed police enter various shops in the area. They've moved upstairs in Selfridges, another very well-known shop there, and at the moment that is almost as much as we know. The trains are still passing through the tube stops, which makes us believe that there are no longer incidents down there, but we just don't know at the moment. Again, a huge police operation in one of the busiest parts of London at the moment. Reports of shots fired earlier on. Armed police on the scene at the moment, but that's very little. There's very little else that we can give you at the moment. That's what the police are saying to us. Now, the transport police, interesting enough, came out as well, and they said that they were responding to a customer incident. That's very vague terminology. We don't know what that means yet, but clearly, on this day of the year, Black Friday, one of the busiest streets in London, they are taking no chances, and a huge operation underway at the moment. We've seen videos of people comforting each other, some panic as the incident itself happened. We don't know what it was, but people streaming out, running as quickly as they could down the streets, with shoes discarded along the way. So clearly initial panic as this incident started to kick off, but no other details beyond there. But just watching the armed police move in some of these buildings, they're taking no chances, and they're going shop to shop. Whether they're looking for something specific or whether they're just clearing, we don't know. But about 4:45 in the evening, that's about quarter to midday in the US, is when this incident began, and police responding to shots fired is what they said, responding as if it were a terror incident. And of course, London has seen so many terror incidents in the last year and two that they just take no chances anymore. And in fact, there are roaming armed police in London waiting at all hours of the day to respond to incidents like this. So there's an incredibly quick response, but at the moment we do not know what that incident was. We just know that the police responded to reports of gunfire, and also the transport police say that they were responding to a customer incident. But again, the busiest shopping street in London on one of the busiest days at one of the busiest times, this is the thing that police fear most. And as soon as we get any more details, we will bring you those from here in London.
Benjamin, it's Dagen McDowell. We're getting into this a little bit. We should remind our viewers that the people of London clearly are on edge after experiencing 2 terror attacks this year. The first in March 22nd, a driver mowed down pedestrians on Westminster Bridge, 5 dead, 49 injured. And then June, a similar tactic used by terrorists, 3 attackers driving a van into pedestrians on London Bridge, stabbing people at a nearby Borough Market, 8 dead, then 48 injured. You were talking about this, Benjamin, but what kind of heightened police presence have you seen living in and around the city? And just talk about the mood of Londoners, knowing that they could again be a target, particularly this time of year.
Well, that's right. You know, ISIS reaches out to its followers, and it suggests targets like this, like Parliament, like Borough Market, all of these locations where attacks have happened. They encourage their followers to get in a car to mow down people. And Oxford Circus, this very busy street, actually brought in bollards some months ago so that it's almost impossible for cars to veer off into pedestrians. So certainly one precaution that has been taken there. And actually we've seen that across London, this need to protect pedestrians. But that being said, this is the time of year that ISIS would seek to attack. And again, a lot of their propaganda recently has been focused on the Christmas holiday. And you remember the Berlin attack from last Christmas there. Also, you know, this is a time of year that people are understandably nervous, and when ISIS seeks to attack. So, of course, heightened security. And you feel it on the streets of London. You know, even if a car backfires, even if there's an incident in a shopping centre where there's a fight, people panic, people run, because they know what has happened in the past. They've seen how bad it can get. So you're right. London feels on edge at the moment. And, of course, on a day like today, in a place like Oxford Circus, you're going to feel it more than anywhere else.
Benjamin, it's Trish Regan here. Obviously, you know, the city is on high alert and very concerned given the previous attacks we have seen this year. I realize there's very little information right now, but do we have any idea, were the police shooting at a suspect, or was a suspect shooting at individuals? Any idea what may have transpired?
Not at the moment. All we know is that there were reports of shots fired. There's no confirmation that there were or there weren't, and they responded to those. So from what I gather, the police have not shot at any suspects. They've not fired their weapons, but they are heavily armed, and we've seen the images of them entering certain shops, very much on point, taking no chances. So very few details to give you, I'm afraid, except that they are responding as if this were a terror-related incident, is what they're saying, because they just don't take any more chances.
Were there any warnings going into this weekend? I mean, did the police put out any kind of extra warning for people there in London?
No, but we were reporting just, nothing specific to London, but we were reporting just a week ago about ISIS propaganda that was targeting Christmas holidays, the Vatican, the Pope, Mass. So certainly we have seen propaganda in general targeting this festive season.
Benjamin, and we have to be careful when we do report these initial details just after the most recent terror attack here in New York City, with that terrorist driving a rental van into crowds of people on a bike path in Lower Manhattan, killing 8 people. Again, I remember the initial reports out of that was it was a road rage incident, or there were reports of shots fired, and indeed it was police firing at the terrorist. So we report what is out there, but again, these are developing details. But Benjamin, have you seen any change in the number of people coming to London, in how just Londoners and people in Britain behave in the wake of the 2 earlier terror attacks?
You know, I can't speak to how many tourists are coming over. I do know some people have decided not to come to Europe in general. You speak to people in the States and they say, of course, it's a concern. We've seen the rise of attacks over there. Why would I risk doing that? But I would have to say that in London itself, there is a real resilience. And, you know, Londoners often talk back to the Second World War and the Blitz, when London was being bombed by the Germans regularly. And there is a sense of London spirit, a resilience, that people actively get back onto the streets right after attacks as a way of showing their solidarity, as a way of showing terrorists that they will not be cowed by these sort of events. So certainly Londoners have not hidden at home. They haven't taken themselves off the streets. If anything, London itself is very much as it always has been. But I do think that it's affected tourism somewhat, and certainly other countries like France have felt that in a pretty big way. But today in particular, Oxford Street, Oxford Circus will be incredibly busy. I mean, this is one of the major thoroughfares of London. And we know that hundreds and hundreds of people were evacuated when this incident began. And you were right to say that there are conflicting reports early on in reporting of events like this. And often you get the same reports from multiple people. So 5 or 6 people will report one incident, and often the media jumps on it and says, well, there are 5 or 6 different things going on. So you're right. Everyone has to be cautious at this early stage. But we do know police are responding to this as if it were a terrorist incident, just because they can take no precautions.
Benjamin, stay right there. I'll let you do some news gathering. Benjamin Hall will come back to you. But joining us now on the phone is Waleed Faris, a Fox News international and security analyst. Waleed, what is your initial reaction to these news reports coming out of London and Oxford Street and the Oxford Circus tube station there?
Well, you know, images are speaking now. We are in the aftermath of what appears to be a violent incident with shots fired. But there is a background, and the background is about there has been in the past many incidents, many terror attacks in London. So it's not out of the blue. But at the same time, one has to be careful. and wait very thoroughly and patiently for British authorities to assert is this was an act of terror, or this could have been violence but not related to terror. So the next hours are going to be absolutely informative in terms of what the UK authorities will tell us. Now, when you see the deployment of armed guards, and then, of course, you start listening to the comments by experts both in London, in Europe, and here, you kind of have the feeling that it looks like a terror activity, but we cannot make that judgment at this point in time.
Waleed, thank you for calling in. Waleed Ferris, I want to jump in and listen to Sky News reporting on this incident.
Is anything going on there? Bond Street's closed. That is due to overcrowding, we're hearing. Oxford Circus closed due to this ongoing incident. And Adele, the London Fire Brigade and ambulance and police all on the scene.
Yes, that's right. As you say, Tottenham Court Road Station closed. That's a direct line along the same streets, Oxford Street. So you have Bond Street, Oxford Circus, and then Tottenham Court Road. So it's seen that perhaps they are widening, the police are at least widening their perimeter on this, looking for the source, perhaps, of these gunshots that were reported into them as being fired at around 16:38. That's when they were called, at least. As you say, London Fire Brigade are on the scene, 3 fire engines, 15 fire officers in attendance. We've heard from London Ambulance Service saying that they're keeping in touch with Metropolitan Police. No casualties as yet, apart from one woman, according to UK Transport Police, saying that a woman has sustained minor injuries when leaving Oxford Circus Station, but no other reports of casualties at this stage, which is good news at this stage. But of course, the police will be trying to find out the source of those gunshots.
Yeah, what we originally heard from the Metropolitan Police in a statement a short time ago was that they were called basically to a number of reports of shots fired. So we haven't had it confirmed at this stage by the police or any security services that were definitely shots fired. The police were called to reports of shots on Oxford Street and also underground in the tube station. Now, we also spoke to an eyewitness, Bryce, on the phone a short time ago. He was inside Oxford Circus tube station, and he told us that there was essentially an announcement over the tannoy asking police to go to a particular platform, and he then witnessed people screaming and rushing for the exits, and the exits roughly where you're looking at on your screen. The area is now pretty much completely cleared, and there's a image of John Lewis just next to Oxford Circus tube station with all the traffic stopped and absolutely nobody there but the Christmas lights on Oxford Street, reflecting that today is Black Friday. The advice from the Met originally was to stay inside and find shelter within shops, but significantly, in the pictures we saw about 15 minutes ago, there were armed police inside Selfridges, which is nearest to Bond Street tube station. We don't know why the armed police were locked inside Selfridges. Our policing expert Graham Wetton thinking that maybe because there were reports of people inside there that they needed to check out. The pictures you're looking at right now, the emergency services, of course, outside Oxford Circus, the Fire Brigade, British Transport Police and the Metropolitan Police all in attendance. Graham Wetton, our policing expert, still on the phone with us. Graham, it's exactly an hour since that call was made. What will the police be doing right now? I hope we can hear Graham. Okay, Graham, I'm sorry, we just missed the start of that, and feel free to begin again.
Yeah, as you rightly said, about an hour since the call first came in, you obviously see the police now trying to move some people away, trying to establish some normality to parts of London, but they're still checking. So the big cordon in place at Oxford Circus tube station, reports of gunshots. They're trying to establish whether gunshots did actually take place, whether it's terror related, whether it's just criminality taking place. The shopkeepers and store owners obviously got some concern about the stores and the people within the stores, so you can see a huge police cordon going in place. And officers basically trying to restore some normality in parts of London while they're trying to deal with a very confusing, very ongoing incident with large numbers of people, lots of accounts and witnesses coming forward, hopefully, to tell them exactly what happened, where it happened, and if there were any suspects, where they are now, which is where you can see the officers conducting some sort of searching going on, and also just standing there trying to find out and establish the actual cause of the incident.
Okay, Graham, thanks for now. Do stay with us. If you're just joining us, here's what's happened. The police about an hour ago were called to an incident at Oxford Circus tube station. They say there were reports of gunfire outside Oxford Street station and underground inside the tube station. They responded as if it was a terrorist-related incident with armed and unarmed officers. They advised people on Oxford Street to go into a building and stay inside, but you are looking at live pictures of Oxford Street and people fairly calmly still walking around. There's no rush or panic to go inside buildings, and the police obviously there. If there was a huge amount of panic right now, they'd be ushering people into those buildings very quickly, so it looks fairly orderly, and people walking away from the scene quite calmly. At this stage, police have only had a report of one minor casualty, a woman around Oxford Street tube station. There's nothing else in terms of casualties to report at this stage. And Adele, as we've said a few times, this is probably one of the busiest shopping days of the year on an extremely busy street as well.
Yeah, that's right. There would have been more people than possibly normal. Black Friday is placed on this particular date for a reason, usually because it's the last paycheck that people traditionally have before Christmas, so that, you know, beginning of a long shopping weekend. And of course at rush hour as well, all of the emergency services are on the scene, of course. Understandably, protocol will have kicked in with this. They will be taking no chances, even if it isn't.
That was reporting from Sky News in London on this incident that happened on Oxford Street and Oxford Circus tube station, right in the heart of London, on one of the busiest, if not the busiest, shopping days of the year. Police responding to calls, a number of reports of shots fired, of gunfire to Oxford Street and the Oxford Circus subway station. The police responding as if it was a terrorist incident. Armed and unarmed officers. I want to bring in Michael Balboni, former New York State Homeland Security advisor. Michael, always good to talk to you. We don't know what any more details about this incident are, but what we do know is that the officers and the police in London stand ready and are on high alert to respond to a potential terrorist event.
So the things that strike you is the time of day. This is rush hour over there, in addition to being the, as you mentioned, the busiest shopping day of the year. And then the fact that any time that there are shots fired in a city like London that has such strict rules about the possession of weapons, that raises certainly a specter as well. We're waiting for other information as to casualties, whether or not there was any other devices at the scene. What makes this obviously very difficult from the standpoint of finding out what's going on is because it's underground. The British Transport Police is the principal law enforcement agency that is responsible for this, as well as obviously the Metropolitan Police, and they're conducting the investigation. But the fact that there are fire trucks on scene perhaps raises it that maybe there are other elements of this that we've yet to learn.
Michael, what do you know about additional security measures that have been put in place, even operational changes for the police in London after the two terror attacks earlier this year, the most recent one being in June, but both involving vehicles running down innocent people, running down pedestrians, killing and injuring many? How would you describe their preparations and how they might have changed procedures?
Well, London has always been ahead of the curve when it comes to surveillance, the ability to coordinate the response of specially trained units to any type of incident. Unfortunately, the incidents that you mentioned happened so quickly, were so random, that there was actually no way that you could prevent them. And the response time is going to matter in those types of incidents. The question becomes now is what have they done in terms of the tube? You know, the tube has always been the center of attacks in the past, you know, when you talk about explosives. But gunfire obviously can happen anywhere that you can get a gun in. There is no screening of weapons into the tube systems, generally speaking. And I know that the British police have been very, very conscious in terms of intelligence and surveillance, and then coordinating that with their response.
Michael, it's Trish Regan here. You mentioned the British police and their gathering of intelligence. My question is just, you know, how much have they ramped that up? Have they done so enough to potentially prevent attacks? You know, we don't know too much right now about exactly why these shots were fired. You don't know if it was the police having found or located someone who they thought was going to be a threat. We don't know if somebody fired the weapon, him or herself. I mean, we're just in a state where we're just learning little bits of information. I should point out that this is the busiest train station in the UK, and there is one woman that we know has minor injuries right now. But in terms of the intelligence gathering there in the UK and in London, how would you rank that?
It's probably some of the best in Europe. You know, the operational intelligence that law enforcement and security forces depend upon has changed dramatically with the advent of social media. There is so much information that comes across right now from everyone from bystanders to what they post on Facebook. And so the challenge for intelligence officials in and around security agencies is to get through that information and try to coordinate it with what they have on the ground, to take a look at the images on the camera and make sure that they can find some type of commonality of image as well as the events that are happening. Obviously, the best intelligence comes from the people who actually are on the scene. But in terms of locking up people or taking a look at people's personal lives and intervening just when they're about to do something, that continues to be the most difficult and possibly impossible to do in many of the situations where individuals decide to radicalize themselves or have had some training but they have not gone overseas, don't have any type of security footprint. And Trish, as you know from covering this for so many years, the expectation of the public is that why can't we stop this? But in a free society, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Michael, it's Dagen McDowell again. What do you know? And again, we're not connecting the dots here and saying this is a terrorist incident. We just know that London has been targeted twice by radical Islamic terrorists this year, killing people with vehicles, with vans. What do you know about the chatter among militants, among potential terrorists online around attacks around the holiday season?
Well, there's two things. One, we've talked about this for a while, Dagen. The digital, the caliphate has gone from the physical caliphate, where ISIS has lost their ability to conduct operations effectively in the Middle East to a great extent, and it's gone digital. So they're trying to spread the attacks, get people radicalized so they can go operational. And so in this case, what we're seeing is that there isn't necessarily specific chatter. It's more like just continue to go through the attacks. And we've seen that in the Middle East. Now it's spreading out throughout Europe. Unfortunately, London has always played a major role in that because of its support in the West and because of its, frankly, of its history of always coming to the aid of the United States when we have the wars in the Middle East. So there was I have not picked up any specific intelligence from any of my sources that says that this is going to be the time, but there is always an opportunity when people are gathered, as we saw in New York City in the Halloween attack. This is going to be an opportunity, unfortunately, continuing for anybody who wants to do mayhem when there's a lot of people gathered.
Indeed, Michael, thank you for that. In Nice and the attack there, it was on Bastille Day, the Christmas market attack in Berlin, Halloween attack here in New York City, and at least what we're seeing, and some incident at the Oxford Circus tube station on Oxford Street, reports of shots fired, police on the scene as responding as if it is a terrorist attack. Michael Balboni, thank you so much for that. We want to take you back to Sky News and listen for the latest details on this developing story.
Commuters that were down in the underground station about shots being fired. Now, the genesis of what those shots were or those noises were, we don't know at this stage. Suffice to say that you can get bangs down in an underground station from a multitude of things. There's a possibility that it was very benign in nature, but on hearing a noise, people may have panicked, perceived it to be something else. The important thing, of course, that British Transport Police, the Metropolitan Police now confirming as well, is that so far they have found no evidence of shots having been fired, no sign of any injured people, and no suspects at this stage, which is obviously a very good thing in terms of the ongoing incident. It is still likely to be quite a protracted incident, though, because they will have other areas to search. We know, for instance, that not just Oxford Circus, but other tube stations either side of Oxford Circus on that central line tube network. So we're talking here Tottenham Court Road and then to the west side, Bond Street, have both been closed as well. Now that may sound as though the incident is spreading. It's not because of that. You're talking about a very busy transport network at rush hour with trains coming in both directions, probably trains being stopped on the platform, maybe even in the tunnel. They need to get these people safely out from those stations as well. So the best way to do that is close down the stations, get people out. There's also a protocol, of course, of an incident that might happen, say, down in Oxford Circus on the tube line. If they're looking for potential suspects, there's always a possibility suspects can disappear up a tunnel. The next station heading up the tunnel west is Bond Street. The next station heading up the tunnel east is Tottenham Court Road. So it may be to allow the emergency services, those armed officers, to carry out a proper search of the tunnel network as well, to make sure that there are no suspects, or indeed even potentially innocent members of the public who've just panicked and jumped up off the platform and up the tunnel. That may sound implausible, but that kind of thing happened during 7/7 when people caught up in those bombings ended up spilling down into the tunnel itself, coming off trains, and just luckily the electrical supply was switched off at that time and they were able to get out of the tunnel. So although things are a bit calmer, it's likely still to be some time before the armed teams that are carrying out the detailed systematic search of the network there and indeed some of the surrounding buildings can absolutely 100% say that this was an incident that was benign in nature, perhaps a misunderstanding, and that there is no threat to life.
Okay, Mark, thank you. While you've been updating us, Mark, we've had some brand new information from the Metropolitan Police and the British Transport Police and TfL. So let's first bring you what you need to know. The British Transport Police, in addition to the Metropolitan Police, have been unable to find any evidence of gunfire. The British Transport Police say they are still on the scene and they are advising people to avoid both Oxford Circus.
We bring it back here to New York. We were listening to Sky News reporting on this incident in the center of London at the Oxford Circus subway station, the tube station there on Oxford Street as well. This tweet from the Metropolitan Police in London: "We have not located any trace of suspects, evidence of shots fired or casualties. Officers still on scene. If you were in a building, stay there. If you are on the street in Oxford Street, leave the area. Officers continue to search the area. More updates as soon as we have them." But this was about an hour and 15 minutes ago. Police in London responding to a number of reports of shots fired or gunfire near Oxford Street at the Oxford Circus tube station. Police responding as if it was a terrorist incident. Armed and unarmed officers on the scene. No reports of casualties. One woman sustaining minor injuries, according to the reporting from our partners at Sky News. Let's bring in Ed Davis, former Boston Police Commissioner, who was the police commissioner during the marathon bombing in the city of Boston. Ed, I think that not knowing the details on what we know that they haven't located a gunman, or they haven't even confirmed any shots fired. But Ed, this response by the police department was heavy duty and not surprising given what's been going on in London this year.
No question. These security services, especially in London, are at the highest level of readiness. And when you have an evening, Black Friday, people are out and starting their holiday shopping, they're expecting something to happen. They have additional personnel on board to cover this event. There's also a show in that area that would bring security services in. So when there's a report that gunshots are fired, they're going to react as if it's an active terrorist incident. However, in looking at the feeds that I've been watching and some of the announcements that have come out just recently, you have to remember that there are a lot of calls for gunshots that turn out to be false reports. You know, any loud noise, especially out of context, will be considered as if it, in fact, was a gunshot, and it takes some time to get to the bottom of it. But from the looks of what I'm seeing here, things seem to be a little laid back. These perimeters that they've set up are porous. People are walking back and forth quite a bit, and the messages that we're getting out of there would probably indicate that this might be a false report, and they just have to run it to ground before they can tell.
Ed, thank you so much for calling in. Ed Davis, former police commissioner in the city of Boston. Always great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you, too. Thank you, Dee.
I want to get to a statement that we have from the British Transport Police. At 4:37 p.m. this afternoon, which would have been about an hour and 15 minutes ago, officers called to the Oxford Circus station following reports of gunfire on the westbound Central Line. Passengers at the station then self-evacuated the station onto Oxford Circus and Regent Street. This caused significant level of panic, which resulted in numerous calls from members of the public reporting gunfire. Officers responded in line with our procedure of a terrorist incident. This included armed officers from Transport and Metropolitan Police Departments. A full and methodical search of the station in Oxford Street was conducted by officers. At this stage, we are examining the circumstances of the incident, which resulted in the station being evacuated. During the evacuation, one woman is believed to have sustained a minor injury. We continue to work with the Metropolitan Police Service and are working to reopen Oxford Circus and Bond Street tube stations. We will bring you more as we get it, but again, this is a response to an incident at a tube station in the heart of London on one of the busiest shopping days, one of the busiest tourist days of the year, and you see a city on high alert, people in London on edge. We will bring you more as we have it. Outnumbered. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Outnumbered. Thank you for being here, Mr. Avella.
Thank you.
People were tweeting, we want to hear from David. We'll have you back, I'm sure.
Very good. Happy holidays, ladies.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. But Jess, you were just quickly pointing out, like, it's rare to hear of gunshots in London.
Absolutely. I lived there for 6 years. We know what their gun control laws look like, and then correlated, there aren't that many guns. But we'll wait to find out, and obviously.
Kat, Jess, David, this lady, you can catch her later. You can catch Outnumbered back here on Monday. Now to America's Newsroom, Leland and Melissa Francis.